A lot of brands are in pretty crowded categories, right? Whether you're in a supermarket aisle and looking at that wall of all the brands that have very similar objectives to clean your hair or clean your laundry or, put sauce on your spaghetti, right? They sort of are very similar from the problems that they solve, but in the end, right, the one brand wants to win. And do you see cause marketing as a vehicle to be that tiebreaker? Like when you have a
Oh,
consideration set of a couple of brands and, Coke, Pepsi, Prego Ragu, whatever it is, like, can you tilt the scales in your favor and win that war with cause marketing?
all day long. And there is data, which I don't have in front of me, that people, especially millennials and Gen Z, if there's a product that literally side by side and they do the same thing, or it's marinara, that one that gives back, one that doesn't, almost every time they're going to go towards the one that doesn't, even if it's more expensive. They will pay more money to a brand or company that gives back opposed to the other.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
Before we delve, Joe, into your current strategic and tactical consulting in the cause marketing category, I'd love you to tell the story about the Chavez for Charity initiative that you were involved in and really spearheaded.
Sure, be happy to. First of all, thank you, Kevin, for having me on. I appreciate it, and I'm excited to talk to you about this. So in early January of 2013, I was the co-founder and CEO of a company called Chavez for Charity. And what we did, my co-founder was a jewelry designer. So we wanted to figure out a way to utilize her experience and skill set to create a company that gave back to different organizations. And, we really didn't know what those were at first, but long story short is we identified 10 different causes that were close to our hearts, whether it was pediatric cancer or gay rights or animals. So we came up with 10, we actually came up with 20 different nonprofits that we liked, and then culled it down to 10, and then associated those 10 causes with 10 different colors. So each color bracelet represented a different charity or different cause. So in January 2013, we launched the company with a handful of employees and one Whole Foods store as our customer. And then just to fast forward, by the end of that year, we were in every Whole Foods in the country in Canada. We were in every Hallmark store in the country. And then within the next couple of years, we were in thousands and thousands of stores across the world. And what was very unique about what we did was rather than creating or finding one cause or charity to donate to, we opened it up to all different types of causes, which really resonated with the customers, because and I know you and I have talked about choice of cause before, and what this gave the consumer the opportunity to find a cause that resonated with them, that they can relate to. And, I used to like to say every color tells a story, because when we be at different shows selling our product, there wasn't a person that came along to look at us as a company and to look at our product and not relate to one of them. And the stories we got were just insane. They were so personal and heartfelt. We supported breast cancer charities, and, a woman would come up and talk about her challenges with cancer or gay rights, whatever it was. Somebody had a story, and that really solidified us as we're a for-profit company, but with a purpose. So, over the next several years, we really exploded. We developed a model within our industry, which primarily was the gift industry. Although, we had, our products, like I mentioned, were in all the Whole Food stores, Hallmark stores, We were in airport gift shops, casinos, like you name it. We were everywhere. So, we were able to really set ourselves apart from our competition, because that was always a challenge. We'd go to these gift shows, especially in Atlanta, and there would be there's 3 buildings of 18 floors of stuff. I mean, everything you could imagine that you would find in a gift shop. And there were, of course, a million different bracelet companies. And, my partner would look at me and go, wait, how are we going to do this? Like, there's a million bracelets. I'm like, no, we're onto something different. And we really did prove that out. And then eventually, we started to see a lot of companies within that industry really adopt our model. So we're always very proud of that. So, we went on, and within our 3rd year, we were doing millions and millions of dollars in revenue, always profitable, never took a dime in investment, really grew it grassroots, grew up to, 60, 70 employees, depending on the time of year. 3rd year in, we won a very coveted Industry Achievement Award at the Retailer Excellence Awards in New York City. So we were just, the company just took us to a place that was beyond our expectations. And it was very gratifying. So I successfully exited that company in late 2018. Since then, I've been helping other companies create cause marketing campaigns. Have really become a student of cause marketing and social entrepreneurship. And what I didn't realize at the time with Chavez for Charity is that after studying cause marketing more and social entrepreneurship, is that Chavez for Charity really was a social entrepreneurial endeavor, because the definition of that is you create something, a company, or utilize something that you have, and that could be a technology, for the better good. And we did just that. The company genuinely, honestly, was created for the purpose of giving back. So that, that's brought me to today. And it's just something I'm very passionate about. There's so much going on, especially today, that there's never a dull moment in regard to events and learning what's going on, what's new in the marketplace, and what businesses are doing.
Thanks so much for telling that story, Joe. I think your timing is particularly good. At more than ever before, I think the light bulbs are starting to go on at brands and at companies that you can do well and do good at the same time by integrating in not just cause marketing, but CSR and potentially corporate philanthropy, and making sure that your consumer understands your authentic desire to help, right, create social impact. And so from that perspective, for folks who are interested in where that light bulb just went on for them, or they feel like they're perhaps not doing it right at the moment, or perhaps they're worried that they're doing it in such a way that it seems inauthentic or like greenwashing, if they need to reach out to you to tap your brain, what would be the best way for them to reach you?
Well, they can go to my website, which is joecerbo.com. So that's JoeCerbo.com. Could also find me on LinkedIn. Just type in Joe Cerbo and I'm there. So those are the 2 best places to find me. Great,
thanks. And one thing that I've also learned, having been a fellow enthusiast around cause marketing, and having written well over 8 million in checks under We Care when we had that running prior to Giving Forward, it is super, super gratifying, and it was also really gratifying to the partners that we had. I like to think of the fact that the A/B split test we ran with Amazon inspired them to launch Amazon Smile, because the timing is quite coincidental.
That's right.
But partnerships are a huge piece of cause marketing, right? Because it requires the triangular relationship between the nonprofits, the brands, and the consumers in such a way that it is really sort of a win-win for all 3 of them, because they all sort of leave the engagement happier, right? And so from that perspective, what are some strategies that businesses should use to think that through? Should they empower the consumer to make the choice around cause the way you did with Chavez for Charity? Should they curate the list? Should they dictate because the CEO's got a favorite charity that they're on the board for? Like, how should they think through those partnership opportunities?
I think very similar to what we did with Chavez for Charity is, when I advise a company or if somebody just asks me what I think about them supporting a different cause, for me, it always starts with what's important to you, right? Because if it's not authentic to who you are, it's just not going to work. Consumers see right through it all the time. And, we'll get into that later about how I feel about how many companies are involved in cause marketing, but it just doesn't feel genuine.
Mm-hmm.
But to get back to your question is, I think it's important for the founders or the executives at the company to kind of take the lead on the direction of where they're going to go in regard to supporting different partners. But I think it's paramount that employees are brought in on it, right? I think because if you don't have buy-in from the employees at every different level, from the executive level to the finance, because it affects everybody. It affects from the executive level, the financial level, marketing, sales, everything. So I always think it's important to bring everyone in and talk. What's important to you? Why is it important to you? And come to a conclusion with the consensus that, this is important to us and why it's important to us. Now, some brands only support one organization, which I get. It can't be like the company I founded where we started off with 10, but eventually supported 20 plus, and we had this other project that we call the 11th Bracelet Project that gave retailers the opportunity to pick a charity or cause that they like to support. And that was unbelievably successful. And I think I know because the retailer got to pick what was important to them and what was important to the people coming into their stores. Now, some of those companies picked big organizations like the Red Cross, but a lot of them picked something local, something that their consumers or customers can respond to and resonates with them. So, I think that's the way to approach partnerships, but please make it authentic, because we all see through it. And unfortunately, we see a lot of that today. There's a lot of virtue signaling. There's a lot of people that implement cause marketing strategies into their marketing strategies or just overall business strategy and use it as a marketing tactic, where it's not genuine.
Right. Absolutely. That's great advice. And let's assume the executive team has sort of gone through the process, hopefully guided by a professional like yourself, and they sort of feel like they've got the strategy locked in. And then they have to execute, right? Because the details end up being really important in this, right? So as you move from sort of strategy to execution, any best practices that you would bring to the surface there?
Well, I think when you're trying to execute on a strategy right, so that's your first step, right? Your first step is to identify what you want to do, who do you want to support, and in what way do you want to do that? Do you want to sell a product that's associated with a different cause, or do you want to volunteer? Like, there's a whole bunch of different ways that a company could get involved and give back. But the strategy or the execution of that strategy is very important. And what we had to do, and what's important, is that you get the buy-in and the cooperation with the cause you're supporting. When we first started the company, we, outside of writing some checks to charities, we didn't know how the machine worked. And I mean that for like how nonprofits work. And we were very surprised by what we found. We would talk to, we supported great charities. Alex's Lemonade Stand Foundation, Best Friends Animal Society, Water.org, International Rescue Committee. And, big companies and big organizations like International Rescue Committee, I mean, their revenue in 2020 was like almost $1 billion. So, we went from that to supporting a smaller breast cancer charity. But the important thing is that you get the buy-in from them and that you understand that and not be afraid to let the organization know that, hey, there's something in it for us, right? It can't be one-sided. And the point I was getting at is when we started, we thought it was one-sided. And one-sided for us. Like, we would talk to people, executive directors at charities, and we'd give our whole spiel. And we were so passionate about it that, nobody could turn us down. But what we didn't realize at the time is that they get 10 calls like that a day. A company will call them and say, hey, we want to put your logo on our mug and we want to give you 10 cents per mug. And we didn't know that at the time. So when we were giving our impassioned pitch, there would just be silence on the other end of the phone. And then finally, when we came up for a breath, they would say, okay, so what do you want from us? And I'd be like, nothing. We're going to write you a check every quarter and we're going to generate all kinds of awareness for you. So what they taught us was that these companies that reach out to them they want the charity to do all the work. Include us in your email blast, put our products here, put our signage here. And we had no intention of doing that. We didn't know better. But as the years went on, and as we were writing very significant checks to these organizations, and some of them were fantastic. Best Friends Animal Society was fantastic. The IRC was fantastic. We did have some organizations we worked with that it was just like writing checks and we just felt no love. So, we started asking at that point, a couple of years in, saying, hey, we want to create a win-win relationship here. We're putting a lot of effort in. We're in 6,000 stores across the world. Your brand, your charity is on every hang tag. We're directing people to your website. We are generating a ton of exposure so we want something back. And there's nothing wrong with that saying that. That's how it's going to be successful. So you talk about, it's a long way of answering your question about execution, but you need to get the charities buy-in on it. And they will help you execute. The good organizations where you have great relationships will help you, execute on it. We've, like I said, we've worked with great organizations that, they had their marketing staff work with us. They had their comms department work with us. Sometimes on the executive level, they worked with us. And of course, we had our internal team. And if we needed external people, we hired them. So yes, execution, what's creating a strategy without execution?
Absolutely. Before we jump into my next question, a comment I'll just make is I just recently had Ron Barrett on from Cogency, which is a company that does all the fundraising filings for nonprofits, to centralize that. But they also have an entire group that handles registration of commercial co-ventures, right? And sort of depending on how you structure cause marketing, you may want to check with a nonprofit lawyer or look up to understand whether or not there might be legal requirements based on the way the rev share happens and who touches the money and when they touch it.
Great
But
point.
people can go back and catch that podcast, which was just a few ahead of yours. So
Yeah, no.
it dovetails perfectly into that. My next question for you is really, there are still a lot of businesses struggling with what to do and when to do it and how to do it. So for businesses who haven't taken cause marketing seriously yet as a strategy, why should they look into it now? Like, I mean, it's obvious to you and to me, but it may not be obvious to them.
Because consumers demand it. And there's data to back that up. There's all kinds of data to back that up. And I'm a data-driven person. and I because I don't like when people throw out, data and surveys and just don't back it up with anything. But to answer that question, like, I'm looking at just, millennials and Gen Z, they will not buy, or very few of them will buy a product that doesn't support something. And that's just a fact. Baby boomers, not so much, different generation. Gen X more than baby boomers, but really millennials and Gen Z expect that. So I have some stats here, 80, and this is based on a Porter Novelli surveys. 86% of consumers believe that companies should take a stand on social issues. 71% of millennials said they would pay more for a product if they knew the proceeds go to charity. And it just goes on and on. So, to answer that question is, you're going to be left behind if you don't. Mm-hmm. And I think if anybody's paying attention, if people are paying attention out there, you can't not see it. 90% of Fortune 500 companies are giving back in some way, and that could be, corporate social responsibility, ESG, ERGs. Like, there's so many different acronyms out there now that it kind of becomes acronym soup. But all the big companies know that they need to be in this, otherwise they're going to be left behind. And smaller companies need to realize that as well. But they just need to make it authentic and create a strategy and implement a strategy that's smart and authentic.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I notice when chatting with folks, including sometimes at fairly large companies, that they conflate CSR and cause marketing, right? They're sort of not really sure where one stops and the other begins. The same thing is true at nonprofits sometimes, especially if they're not used to doing or engaging in partnerships and programs. So how do you describe it differently when you're chatting with a company and they sort of say that they want to give back, right? But they're not really sure yet whether they want to do something that's corporate philanthropy or CSR or cause marketing, and you're sort of helping them think that through.
Well, I think that acronym soup I just talked about is all conflated. I think it even confuses me sometimes. Like, especially CSR and ESG, they're very, very similar in what they do. So it's corporate social responsibility and environmental, social, and governance, right? But they are conflated in a way. They kind of piggyback on each other. And just based on the words in those acronyms, you could kind of get a feel for what they, stand for. Social obviously is a company that takes a stand socially, right? And, you take bigger companies that manufacture products, whether it's overseas or in the United States, that, the employees are being treated properly. And that there is diversity and inclusion, and then environmental and sustainability are obvious, that products are being made from sustainable products and the carbon footprint and all that. Cause marketing really sits on its own, because cause marketing is fairly straightforward. It's the majority of time you have a product or service and you're donating a percentage of that to a different, to a cause. ESG and CSR, really are more of a not complicated, but they're more involved than cause marketing. So that's how I would, kind of differentiate those. Very similar, but with subtle differences and different reporting. ESG, the Dow Jones has their sustainability index, right? And if I remember correctly, I think they take 20% of the top 2,500 companies at Dow Jones, and that's how they measure that index in regard to what companies are meeting certain criteria in regard to social, environmental, and governance. So it's very important, from a shareholder perspective, that companies do get really involved in being a part of that movement, for lack of a better way. And hopefully it's not just a movement. I don't think it's a movement. I think it's something that's going forward is imperative to success in business.
Great. Thanks for the clarification there. Certainly cause marketing includes within its name the word marketing, and therefore marketing is often held to ROI targets. So is it possible, and is it common for cause marketing programs to actually have a positive ROI?
Absolutely. Can I go back to my data?
Sure.
So I have some data from a report from IO Sustainability, a research firm, and they found that by implementing some kind of cause marketing or sustainability component into your business, that it enhances sales by as much as 20%. It increases productivity by 13%. It reduces employee turnover in half. it increases the company's share price by up to 6%. So yes, very important. It does drive sales. And I think one of the more important, well, it's not more important than driving sales, but it's on par with it, right? They run parallel, is that it's also about the company's reputation, which goes along with sales, right? If the company has a great reputation, that's going to increase sales and loyalty, brand loyalty. So, it's without a doubt helps in all those aspects of business, and is definitely, worth, if you're not doing it, worth exploring. So yeah, it does definitely drive sales.
So, given the various elements of positive ROI there, obviously some of what you mentioned from the data there isn't purely sales numbers. It's employee retention, it's share price, stock price, which of course one could say, well, that's due to increased sales because it's net present value of future cash flows. But it seems like it's almost a no-brainer to engage in cause marketing. And I tend to think about cause marketing as being somewhat ROI driven, whereas corporate philanthropy is this thing that there's sort of no expectation of a quid pro quo, or no expectation other than maybe some good PR coming out of it. Do you feel like, given that CSR has this obvious benefit, that either companies should shift money out of corporate philanthropy and into cause marketing, or should they sort of keep those two independent and just ramp up cause marketing more because that's sort of a no-brainer for them?
I would say keep them separate, right? I mean, philanthropy is, it's, I don't want to say it's a dated word, but it's more, it was more pre Live Aid, right? It was more pre, Live Aid was 1985. And that was really when I think people as a mass globally really started to understand the power of contributing and giving back. Philanthropy, I always thought of, and this is just my personal opinion on it, was big corporations writing checks, right? And maybe because they genuinely felt that they wanted to help a cause out, or maybe for a good press release. But so I think they're two separate things. It's great to write a check, great to support a cause. Cause marketing is more involved. Like, you're hands-on, you're involving every aspect of your business. You're promoting it, you're training your salespeople and marketing and your comms groups on how to, talk about it. So it's much more involved than just writing a check. So I would keep them separate. That'd be my recommendation.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. A lot of brands are in pretty crowded categories, right? Whether you're in a supermarket aisle and looking at that wall of all the brands that have very similar objectives to clean your hair or clean your laundry, or put sauce on your spaghetti, right? They sort of are very similar from the problems that they solve, but in the end, right, the one brand wants to win. And do you see cause marketing as a vehicle to be that tiebreaker? Like, when you have a consideration set of a couple of brands and, Coke, Pepsi, Prego Ragu, whatever it is, like, can you tilt the scales in your favor and win that war with cause marketing?
All day long. And there is data, which I don't have in front of me, that people, especially millennials and Gen Z, if there's a product that literally side by side and they do the same thing, or it's marinara, that one that gives back, one that doesn't, almost every time they're going to go towards the one that doesn't, even if it's more expensive. They will pay more money to a brand or company that gives back opposed to the other. So, there's so many different benefits to implementing some kind of cause marketing strategy. You walk through any store, I'm surprised I don't see more of it. I've always been a fan of Paul Newman's, right?
Yeah, me too.
I mean, I've been by, I will go to Paul Newman's 100% of the time, whether it's marinara or popcorn or whatever else they're selling, because they've been around for so long, and they have such a great reputation of doing such great work, and 100% of their profits go to their work. So, that's always a go to me. Always go to Paul Newman.
Yeah, it's in the case of the Newman brands, whether it was the Numinos, which are like their Oreo clones, or their sauces.
which I buy, I probably have in my cabinet.
But they're really lucky because their products are also really, really good, right? I
Yeah,
think it would be a more difficult choice if their products weren't excellent, right? So
right.
they're sort of certainly on par, if not a little bit better in certain cases with some of their salad dressings, where it's like I wouldn't even need I wouldn't need the cause market. I'd probably buy it anyway. But certainly as a tiebreaker, I think Newman is a perfect example
Well,
of
that's
where
because they
they
have been
rank.
around so long and they've created their brand around giving back. I mean, that's what the brand stands for. It's not like they had an existing brand and then, slapped we give 100% the profit. They created that brand around giving back. And I think that's, you talk, going back to digress, what I said about authenticity,
Right.
it's so ingrained because I worked with them for a short period of time because we created a line of bracelets for kids, and we worked with the Paul Newman charities for a period of time, and I got to know the people there, and they just speak the language. Like, that's just who they are. It's not a campaign. It's in their DNA. So yeah, so there's definitely, yes, people will absolutely choose one product over another if it gives back.
Great. Let's go back to the topic we alluded to a little bit earlier, which is this idea of at the company or at the brand level, sort of deciding to which level to curate the causes, either at the individual brand level or at the category level, versus empowering the customers to choose, and the extent to which you might, for example, use your employees as an initial sounding board, and then create a limited set of curated categories of nonprofits or individual nonprofit brands from that process, but then have the consumer choose. I mean, obviously, with Chavez for Charity, choice was from day one, right? In your vision for that, but we don't always see choice, right? We don't always see choice when brands engage in cause marketing. So, how would you advise somebody coming to you now and trying to sort of decide how to create a curated set, or what is it 3 different categories or 3 different brands? Is it a single one? How should they think that through?
Well, I think that depending on what your product is, right? And this is a good point, right? So I think obviously if you're selling water, right? And you're a bottled water company, you want to support something that supports water, right? So what you want to do is try to align the cause with your product or service, because that makes the most sense. Going back to authenticity, it just makes the most sense because you have a story to tell, and maybe your product solves the problem, right? So that would be when I consult with people, with companies, I say just that. Okay, let's take a look at your product, your individual product, or your suite of products, or your suite of services, and let's talk about how we can take what you do to potentially solve a problem or just support that problem in the most authentic way that you can. So that's where I would start. But once you figure out, or once a company figures out what direction they want to go in, whether it's with supporting one cause or one charity or several, I'm thinking about this. There's so many great big Fortune 100 brands that do such a great job. I mean, take Unilever; they do a phenomenal job on cause marketing and just philanthropy in general, and they have hundreds of different products. And if you look at some of the campaigns, like their Dove campaign was always huge, right? And then they continue to do it for many, many years. But they have so many products across their portfolio that they're all associated with different causes because they relate to the product, right? Which is obvious. So that's step one. Who can you align yourself with that aligns with you? And then, there's a lot of great resources out there for doing some vetting, right? I always use Charity Navigator, which is phenomenal. So if you're thinking about supporting XYZ cause, go to charitynavigator.org, and you can type in what organization you're looking for or just a cause, and it's going to give you the most detailed information available on that cause. It ranks it. You get to take a look at their 990, which is their financial forms required by the IRS. You find out everything about them. Everything about how much money goes to admin opposed to programs, the salaries of the executives, who their biggest donors are, and you really get a great feel for who you are potentially going to work with. And that is so important. You want to work with somebody that's reputable. I've personally worked with, like I said earlier, phenomenal organizations, but I worked with some bad ones too. I worked with, not a lot, but I worked with some organizations that just couldn't tell me where the money was going, and it just, in my gut, felt weird. I had to get meetings with the board. They couldn't tell me where the money was going. So it's important that you know where the money's going. If you can meet the executive director or people higher up in the organization, do that. You are going out of your way. You're putting a lot of energy and resources and money into creating these partnerships. You have every right to ask questions, to know who's involved, to know where the money's going, to know how much money's being spent on admin versus programs versus fundraising. So you've got to take it seriously because you're putting a lot of effort into it. There are companies, like we said before, that just want to slap, I give 10% of my profits to this company. Those aren't the companies that are taking it seriously and really doing the digging. If you want to create a comprehensive strategy and make it a win-win and to really help that cause out, it takes a lot of work. And that's where I come in from an advisor perspective and as a consultant, is that I can just advise on a high level, pretty much talking about what we're talking about right now. Like, here's the steps you need to do. And so I can do that. You and I, Kevin, could just have a conversation, and then that's all good. I'm happy to have a conversation with anybody because I love talking about it. But there's execution. Some companies don't have the resource to execute on it or the know-how. So, I can go from the high level of advising, having a great conversation, to everything from putting the strategy together, vetting organizations, delivering reports, executing on everything. If the company doesn't have internal creative resources, I have all those resources. So, I'm not sure where I was going with that, but it's just getting, like, I almost forgot where your question was because I get off on a tangent. But it's important to just have all your bases covered and to understand who you're giving to and to really do your homework.
Absolutely.
If I got off track on that, just reel me back in. Because I could just go forever.
I'm sure we could both go forever. In the last answer earlier, you mentioned Unilever, right? And I think one of the things that I really admire about the way in which they executed is some of the stuff that they execute against, they don't brag about at all. And unless you sort of really dig deep, you don't even know they're doing it, right?
That's right.
If I'm remembering correctly, one of the examples is obviously Ben & Jerry's sold to Unilever ages ago. And there's a bakery in Yonkers called Greystone Bakery, which is staffed almost exclusively by ex-cons. That's their mission, right, is to give ex-cons an opportunity, and really actually beyond only ex-cons, sort of basically anybody who's willing to work can go there and try to get a job in that bakery. And they bake all the brownies for all the Haagen-Dazs products. So they source awesome. Their brownies from there, right? Do they brag about it? No, you have to sort of know. I mean, if you didn't dig deep and maybe look really carefully at the label, I'm not even sure if it's on the label, but it's so intrinsic to the way they were thinking at Ben & Jerry's before the acquisition and the way they continue to think there, that they're just like, no, well, this is a good idea, right?
Right.
They don't have to go out and trumpet it from the rooftops, right? They can just feel proud that they're doing that, right? And the Greystone Bakery has both its regular, I think it's a for-profit, and it's got its foundation as well. But even the for-profit, by given who they hire and their hiring practices, it's an inspiration company, right? And every brownie bit that you eat out of a Ben & Jerry's is percolating up through the chain back to Greystone Bakery.
I did not know that. That's awesome. Now, Ben & Jerry's, I should have mentioned, Ben & Jerry's is just a leader in it. Another great company is the North Face. They've been involved in sustainability and everything for years. And much like Ben and Jerry's and Unilever, they don't brag about it necessarily,
Yeah.
unless you dig into it.
Right.
They're happy. They do it for a reason. They do.
Yeah, Patagonia, same thing, right?
Patagonia.
Yeah.
Like there's some companies, great companies out there doing great work, and they, aren't just doing it for a press release.
Right.
They're doing it because it's important, and it's important to their employees, and it's important to their shareholders. More importantly, it's important to their stakeholders, which includes all of that. Anybody that has a stake in that company could feel good that the company that they work for or buy from is doing stuff without banging on their chest saying, "Look at me." And I get goosebumps thinking about it, because that I do. I mean, that's what it's about, and that's what I hope to see more of. And
Absolutely.
I think we will. I think we will.
I hope we do. It's going to be an interesting year next year, because obviously there are fears of a potential recession, and recessions often come with reductions in disposable income, right? Which have two ramifications. It has ramifications on the regular macroeconomy, because people might be changing their buying patterns, buying less of certain things, but it also changes their donation patterns. So cause marketing sits on top of both of those areas. So do you feel like there's a potentially a different way that brands should think about cause marketing in a recessionary environment, or is it basically the same strategy either way, whether it's
I think they should. I think they should double down, right? Because based on some of the data I shared with you, and based on the abundant amount of data that's out there, is that if we're heading into a recession, whether that's real or not, you need to drive sales, right?
Absolutely.
And based on what we know from cause marketing and sustainability efforts and all that does drive sales, right? Maybe a handful of years back, it wasn't an indicator of increased sales and profits, but it is now. So double down on it. Make sure you're doing it, right? That would be my advice to any company. It's kind of analogous to companies that are doing terrible. Sales are down. They're having a hard time, and the first thing they cut out is sales and marketing. I'm like, I don't know. Why would you do that? Isn't there something else you could cut out? Like, that's what you need now.
Right.
So if we're heading into a recession and people aren't spending money, going back to the Paul Newman example, right? If people are there's products that people need. So if they have a choice between brand A and brand B, your brand is B and it gives back based on data, they're going to lean your way. So double down on it. I think there's just based on what's going on in the world, not only are you helping that out, but you are kind of, I don't want to say insulating, but you're helping your company stay relevant and stay top of mind.
Absolutely.
That would be my advice.
Absolutely. So, Joe, do sometimes great ideas about supporting causes come from within the employees of a company?
Oh, absolutely. A lot of the time. I'm actually doing some work with a phenomenal creative agency in New York City called Company Creative. And they're created a campaign for Nespresso. And that was all really the impetus of the campaign was generated by the employees, by these employee resource groups. And what they did was they partnered with the Ali Forney Center, which is an nonprofit organization in New York City that works to help the LGBTQ community prevent or not be homeless, right? So to find them homes, to keep them safe. And they created this campaign that really resonated not only with the Nespresso customers, but with the community at large. So it's important more and more. I mean, you talk about what's exciting about the years to come, these ERGs are really taking a hold within companies, and employees' voices are being heard. And there's change being made, like real change being made. And it's got to start from within. It's no longer the day of, the CEO or the people, at the top level or in the C-suite making all the decisions. The employees are definitely getting involved, which is super important.
Great. Well, I look forward to continuing to follow your journey as you go through and help companies take advantage of the intersection of cause marketing, corporate social responsibility, and even empowering their employees to make a difference. Thanks so much for joining me, Joe.
Thank you, Kevin.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in the Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.